Okay, everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. This is another episode of The Full Set. I am your hostess with the most six. My name is Didi Delgado, and I am here with my esteemed colleague, none other than Sadada Jackson. Sadada, welcome to The Full Set. How you doing?
How you doing, Karen?
So I know that we spoke off camera, but I wanted to welcome you again because for me, I've been curating this space since April 9th, and it's very important to me to have people whose voices need to be uplifted. And a very dear friend of mine was like, I know exactly who you need to have on the show. So I was like, who? And she said, Sadada. So shout out to Luana. Thank you so very much for the referral and recommendation. I don't know if y'all know what I know, but I'm letting you know right now that we are in the presence of immeasurable greatness. I'm going to introduce to you Sadada the way that I have been introduced to Sadada, and we're going to get into it. Here we go. Posting your payment links right now is the pinned comment. People already your fans. Like, that's so cute. I love it. Here we go. So Sadada is a student of practice who lives in her body and vacations in her mind. She has a master's degree in theological studies from Harvard in Indigneous Traditions, a master's in education from UMass in secondary English language arts, and she's a trained 200-hour hatha, yoga and yoga therapeutics teacher. She works as a coach, consultant, and facilitator with individuals and groups who do the work of healing and educating. The goal of her work is to end the relational and structural violences impacting all marginalized bodies, particularly Black and Indigenous bodies. So y'all want to know the credentials? Not that it's important, because this woman just told you she lives in her mind and vacations in her body. She's got a BA in theater from UMass Boston, a master's of education in secondary English and language arts, MTS in indigenous traditions, and a 200-hour RYT with Bo Forbes in hatha yoga and yoga therapeutics. She is a trained Afro-Cuban, Haitian folkloric, and modern dancer, a fire keeper in the Mayan tradition. Her tribal affiliation is Nipmuc, and Sadada's pronouns are she and they. Sadada, welcome, welcome, welcome to The Full Set.
Thank you. Yeah, I first want to say Waniga and Wanino Kishkwa.
Oh, wait, hold on one second. Can you turn up your volume, please?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, because I think you moved further away. That's what happened. We need to see this beautiful shirt. That's what happened.
Right, the shirt and the volume. I'll project.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
So Wanigan, Wanino Kishkwatwang and Konibia. Good day.
Thank you. Good day.
Be here with you. And welcome.
So when I first saw you appear on my screen, I was like, wow, you came through dripping. You like, I feel like you did this on purpose. You just woke up and you was like, and I just thank you for sharing your beauty with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
So your shirt, protect your energy. Are you doing that? Are other people doing that? Are people moisturizing and minding their business? What's happening? It's 2020.
Yeah. First I got to shout out the giver of the shirt, Lama Rod, who's always teaching me through our relationship. I don't know that people are doing it, but I feel like it's a central practice of mine. And, part of protecting my energy, and I always like to start in this way when I speak, and that is to, first acknowledge the place that I'm at.
Okay.
So I want to first acknowledge, I'm here in Nonatum, which is right outside of Boston. It's the land of the Massachusetts, in addition to the land of the peoples who are their kin, which are my tribal kin, the Nipmuc and the Wampanoag. And I also, as part of protecting my energy in this acknowledgement, which is relational to me, very intimate, but also in terms of my work in the world, I also have to acknowledge the love, both for liberation, but also the labor. My African, my Black African enslaved ancestors, whose love for liberty and liberation made possible the institutions and the infrastructures that we all benefit from. And we owe them a big debt to live from that liberation and to center that in all the work that we do. And then I want to thank you.
Oh, you want to thank me?
Absolutely.
Right after thanking the ancestors? Okay, all right.
Absolutely, because it's what you do, you know. I think how we begin is who we are.
Like now I feel wholesome. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. I want to thank you, Didi, for always like doing the labor of being in the front of what matters as our Black femme body lives. That this is no small job or task. You know, that there's a big debt that we owe to you too, both in support of that, in love of that, you know, so that you can both rest and restore and continue to be.
Thank you for saying that. I think about, you know, I just found out about land acknowledgements because I was asked to do one, or I was asked, do I know how to do a land acknowledgement? I said, oh, what? But because I always feel like not knowing something is actually a propellant for me to figure out what I don't know. I went to go look it up because I think, you know, love her to death, but I think she was like, y'all niggas ain't doing land acknowledgements. I mean, you know, like basically I was like, okay. So I went to go look it up and I felt like very whole by the acknowledgement of a land acknowledgement. And I was wondering, is there ever, you know, we talked about this a little bit offline, is there ever a solidarity moment with being, like you just said, you're indigenous, and that word is like nomenclature, because literally being Black African is also indigenous to where we come from, wherever we were stolen from. And the first time I guess I even thought about this outside of the land acknowledgement was I was on a call with Brazil activists this Saturday, and just listening to them speak, and they have the same Black and indigenous issues, right? So Black folks were captured and brought over and then there are people that are indigenous or native to the land of Brazil. And so those two people got together, those two groups got together and actually had a slave uprising. And I'm like, when is it ever gonna happen in Canada and the United States? Gang, gang, I don't know. So what are your thoughts about, if you have any, about land acknowledgements? Because like I said, I didn't know that we were supposed to honor, like I kind of heard it before, but not really certain why, because I've never seen, in my experience going to Standing Rock, all of that, I've never seen indigenous folks native to this country, I've never seen them like acknowledge Blackness and how it intersects, you know. So what can we do, or what steps can we move to mend that relationship?
Well, I mean, so I'm Nipmuc, and being Nipmuc means that we're deeply related and identified in terms of our African ancestry as well. Like those things are not separate. I mean, I think to separate them in some ways is a very colonizing worldview. The fact is that Africans and natives were sold in the same types of slave trade, especially from these lands in the Northeast, you know, whether it be to the Caribbean or back to Europe. And so these histories are, you know, again, I'm just speaking from these lands, have just been historically intertwined. And to separate them, I think, is a misfortune of colonization. And you know, I also acknowledge that, you know, there are many indigenous people who might not have the same African ancestry that don't acknowledge in that way. But I can't leave any parts of myself out of who and where I am. I mean, I think if I'm going to be embodied, I have to bring all of myself here. You know, and I'm interested in that. I'm interested in all of us doing that. Because I think the only way that we can end the kind of violence that bifurcates us in terms of our identities, racially, gender, sexuality, and so on, is that we have enough capacity to hold and to bear witness, but also to honor all of who and what we are. You know, I intentionally choose to do the land acknowledgement and the ancestral acknowledgement in that way, because these are my ancestors. You know?
Right, of course.
Land, I'm not just acknowledging a place, I'm acknowledging a relationship, but also a responsibility.
Mm.
And that responsibility, because of my own ancestral lineage, cannot be singular. And it can't be supremacist, it can't be hierarchical, one over the other. And given the reality that this land, this colony was founded on indigenous land and Black labor, in some ways, it's my effort to really heal and repair, you know, that real original wound.
When you say original wound, I get like chills, because I'm like, is Luana over here talking to us as well? Luana always talking about somebody's wound.
Yeah.
I guess it's important because we would have to know that we are wounded in the first place in order to heal. A lot of us are on healing journeys, myself included. And I'm like, wound? What wound? I'm fine. Like, you know? And so is there, I know that you did an event at Leslie last year in April, and it was like the first of its kind at Leslie, because Leslie,
Yeah.
shout out to Leslie University, who allowed us to do the first BLM Cambridge Symposium. But Leslie has a long way to go. So I was actually really excited to hear that y'all had a trauma-informed and care event. And so do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like, why is that even necessary? And what does that topic mean to like a basic person like me from Roxbury?
Well, you know, I'm a basic bitch from Mattapan Hyde Park.
I want basic bitch. I was like, I respect her shine too much. This melanin is just too much for me. I love it. So, thank you for being from Mattapan.
Just saying, Belleville Village all the way. So yeah, so you know, I had been working for the last year for the sponsors of that, which is the Center for Trauma and Embodiment, and doing consulting work with them around centering, you know, racialized justice.
Right.
And so my, you know, at the center of my work is like, how do we embody justice, you know, identity justice in particular, in our relationships and the structures that we either choose or create when we encounter each other in the spaces we call work. And for some of us, our work is amorphic, and that our work is not separate from our lives, you know,
right.
Yourself, like this is your life work, you know, and some of us, it's a place we go
baby
to. You know what I'm saying? So I was asked to, you know, just kind of talk about this, you know, what does it mean to really do the work? And for me, work is about labor, you know. And when I mean labor, I mean the internal labor, not just the emotional labor. Sometimes it's spiritual labor, sometimes it's ancestral labor, you know, to do that work of justice. You know, I think for me, you know, I don't call myself an activist, but I put activism in my work.
Okay.
But the point of the goal of the work is to be actively engaged in the liberation of those of us who are marginalized and oppressed, whether you have that identity or not. We all have that responsibility. And so, so I was just asked to, you know, kind of give a workshop and just talk about, you know, what, you know, give people that experience of how they would begin that journey. And it is labor, you know, it's like Rihanna says, it's work, 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 work. Everybody work, work, work. You know, it's a little twerking in the back.
Team.
You know, and it's a commitment. You know, it's a commitment that we have to decide to do again and again and again. So, you know, for me, you know, a lot of my work is to try to create the causes and conditions for people to want to do the work.
Right. Okay.
You know,
oh, people have to want to do the work? Absolutely.
You know, like Marvin Gaye said, I want you, but I want you to want me too. I don't just want you to want me, you know, because that's a
wow.
little, you know what I mean?
You got to romance the work, I guess, you know?
You got to want to do the work.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what that means is that there has to be an authentic internal motivation on your part. There has to be something in it for you to want to do this work. And it doesn't matter to me what your identity location is. You have to feel like this liberation for those who are not liberated, including those I might be oppressed,
Right.
is important to me too. It is central to me. Not because I'm doing something for them, I'm doing something for me. You know, Toni Morrison in her conversation.
You better talk about it.
Saying, I'm gonna bring Elder, Luana, I have to bring Elder Toni into the conversation.
Luana, I want that candle because I know you watching. Thank you. I'll pick it up before I leave. Thank you.
And so I re-listened to her conversation with, it was on Progress, and it was between her and Sister Angela Davis. And what they were talking, what Elder, St. Morrison was talking about was the notion that, nobody spends a lot of time studying the impact of violence on the person who commits it. So much time and effort and energy and movement. And not that I don't think that she was giving a critique, that there should be less of that. But nobody is really interested in what happens to the person who's oppressing. What happens to their psyche? What happens to who?
Why should we be interested in what happens to their psyche? I feel
be,
like you have the answer.
Well, I think we should be interested in that, because not because we need to fix that, because we understand that they too are suffering, and we don't need to get caught up in that. Like there's a kind of a boundary, that we understand that this has nothing to do with me, but this actually has to do with some pain that they're entangled with. Similar to the friend who's, going through something, who's, feeling.
Let me get some water.
Like, I want the motherfucker who doesn't like me to really suffer less, because they will create less suffering for me. Not because I'm necessarily some good realized person, but because I understand, for me, when I suffer, I create more suffering.
This is super holistic. I feel like I just heard you say that the person who's trying to cause me suffering, I don't want them to suffer because they're going to create more suffering.
Absolutely.
It's revolutionary what you're saying. And deep down inside, I know a bad bitch like myself has had this thought a time or two. But Sherazar just said what was on my heart. And so I have to ask her question. She said, spiritual work is communal for folks who want to be in community, but can be energetic vampires. So how can you help them and honor your shirt?
Get a boundary.
Oh shit.
Be a boundary bitch. Like, you have to be willing. You have to be, so the 4 pillars of my spirituality are Buddhism, yoga, Ifa Santeria, and Native American spirituality. Like, these are the 4 pillars. So I'm in terms of like suffering less, I'm talking from my Buddhism. I'm talking from that, right? And to some extent yoga as well, but really my Buddhism. The reality is that, I'll share a story, and I think it's Tara Brach who talks about this story, about when you see a dog who's like a rabid dog, a dog foaming at the mouth. And then as you come across that dog and you go around the corner, you realize that dog is actually trapped in something. You get a different perspective on that dog, but you are not going to go and touch that dog.
Right.
You see what I mean? And that's a boundary. In some ways, the boundary allows you to have some discernment.
Ooh.
Right? That it's actually not my work to do this for you, but I can bear witness. I can hold this space, or I can get out of this space and not get caught up in your bullshit, in your pain, in your suffering. There's a way in which sometimes I think that community for some of us means codependence. And I think we have to really do the work to make some distinction around that. And the only way we can do that, I think, is doing our deep work, is excavating our own pain. You know, I think sometimes we do community activism, you know, fill in the blank relationship from a place of our own pain. It is not obviously the healthiest, but I also don't think it's the best way to connect.
So she says, for your information, it's me. I'm the energy vampire. My folks be putting up with me, but I feel myself showing up like that. And that is also why I feel like a lot of times as organizers, as Black femmes, that a lot of times it is up to us to delegate, right? Like, and be like, this needs to get done. Like, and however, you know, but I feel like that comes I can't believe I'm talking about this with you. That comes with a lot of trauma around not being able to complete tasks or being admonished by your parents or whatever. And so there's like an overcompensation. And if there's already fractures with other people who are hurting, just because that's their stuff and that's in their lives, I feel like something Luana says all the time is appropriate here. As organizers or as charismatic organizers, or even if you take the charisma out, like Sherazar, and just be a regular leader. I love you, Cher. So how do we not continue to meet one another at the wound? And that's a question Luana has given to me a year ago. I don't know if I know the answer. I just had a therapy session and I was like, why do the same situations keep popping up year after year? Even if I remove myself from the situation, how do I do better? Because I could sit in church, you know, I don't go to church, but I could sit in church and be like, y'all hear that word? The pastor's speaking to y'all, but really also me. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so I definitely identify with Sherazar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a time where, you know, something I said after my time at Harvard, which exhausted me. You know, I don't think I knew imperialism in this kind of structured way until I'd been there. And it does not mean that everything that I experienced there was awful, but there was a kind of pedagogical imperialism that was challenging for me. You know, having gone to 2 state schools, you know, before, I had not had this experience in a kind of Ivy League institution. But after I finished that, and I think this speaks to what you're saying, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, people were like, oh, so what do you have to say? And, you know, because this whole expectation, you got some more to give. And all I had to say was, we need to talk less. We need to do less, and we need to be more. And what I meant by that is that I think that there's a way in which, you know, a lot of my work is informed by trauma, right? Because I mean, you can't talk about violence and not talk about trauma. I mean, I don't know that every violence ends in trauma, but I do know every trauma is caused by some kind of violence. And so thinking about it in that way, we know that the response to trauma is based in what we know about the basic fight, flight, or freeze response. And those kind of primal responses to experience or perceptions of danger, I think, are really important. But if that's where we're relating from, that's where we're connecting from, right? We're kind of doing this work of connecting that's in some ways from a very topical, I'll say, place, as opposed to from a rooted place, a place of trust. And so for me, I'm not talking less, and doing less does not mean being quiet, and it does not mean sitting still. It doesn't mean that.
Thank you for the clarification, because I was like, oh shit, I gotta shut the fuck up forever.
No. What it means is that when we speak, we need to speak from a place of our most grounded being. And when we do, we need to do from our most grounded being, from our most resourced being. You know, that's not the place in which trauma exists. You know, there's a way in which, you know, I grew up with activists. And I grew up as somebody who was going to be next prime to be some type of activist, whether it was political or social or community, it didn't matter. But G. McGuire, and Ruth Batson, and those folks, Sister Bertie and Mitchell Brown, people who had been in things like the busing and things like desegregation in Boston, and who were like, oh no, she's got it. She's clear on whatever. And what I witnessed is the way in which there's a real extracting that happens when we don't have a collective way of mobilizing that's based in trusting each other, loving each other, and a stillness in knowing that we have what we need to make the movement and the change. And what it does, particularly to Black femme bodies, is that it robs them of their capacity, ability to love and be loved, to hold and be held, to trust and be trusted on a very basic level. So my decision to not be public with my activism was like, oh no, there has to be an injection within the relationship as well as within the structures that hold this kind of liberatory work. Because without it, it creates a kind of violence on the Black female bodies. And the Blacker, the more femme they are, the more violence. At least what I witnessed.
This is something that's like, if my heart chamber wasn't circular, I could feel it like literally pitting on the walls of like my missing phantom chamber that's not there. It's like, and I know that this is from my mom. I would like to extend to you an invitation for pay. I will like to email you. There's something I'm missing. I'm a huge organizer. That's what I do behind the scenes. So I want to say thank you for thanking me, because I think a lot of people don't see me out and they think I'm not organizing, and that would be far from the
streets. Maybe not these streets, but the streets, honey. Oh no, I see you.
So we have a lot of frontline organizers have been saying we felt overwhelmed, and a lot of frontline organizers are Black femme bodies, let's just be honest. And so I already knew what they needed because I was there in 2017 and I was like, y'all, I need this, So it just kind of like fell into place. Everyone kind of said, yes, Dee Dee, we'll do it. Just give us the direction. And besides the fact that something very personal and traumatic just happened to me like last Wednesday, I've been feeling this capsizing. I don't know how to explain it other than that. And I'm like, there needs to be a conversation, because when this moment in the movement is over, we are going to have to lean on one another more than what we were doing before, because now the work is actually here. Not that it wasn't here before, but the visibility to make sure the work is done correctly. And I don't think we should be at each other's necks the way that we are. So I'd like to extend to you, because everyone else is getting paid. But I was like, there's an element here that I'm not. I said, I don't even want to organize the shit anymore, because there's an element here. I can train you and have outside trainers come and tell you about nonviolent direct action, surveillance, all that shit. But there's a heart like level that I can be sitting right in front of you and I'd be like, I don't fuck with that bitch. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, I don't want to be like that. And I know other organizers don't want to be like that, but we have to, because of the violence that we bestow upon each other, because of what's been bestowed upon us. So I appreciate you even giving like space to this conversation, because I never even considered the two things were connected.
They are. I mean, I think that like, for me, it's like, when this is not work of the heart, both the broken heart and the heart that loves and needs love, it is just an act of violence. And I get it. A lot of violence has been normalized on Black femme bodies. A lot of it, and it's unacceptable. And when it's normalized, it also means that the propensity for it to be internalized is high. And yet we have to want to unlearn it. We have to want to do the work. not to be aspirational in what could be, but what is like in this moment, you know, and have that be the soul by which the things grow. You know, and that takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of courage, but it's not outside courage. It's in ourselves and amongst one another. You know, and it also takes an enormous amount of willingness to grieve. You know, to grieve who we thought, not just I am, but who we thought one another was, how it was gonna be. You know what I mean?
That's dope. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I would definitely hear that, because I feel like a lot of conflict between organizers is like, and you were supposed to show up one way, and we're both pointing at each other, and you showed up this way, like, you know. And so thank you for that duality. I feel like this whole conversation has been about duality. I'm like, I don't want to see people like that. I see people how the fuck I see people. And also, right, I just had a conversation with a friend of mine where I was like, you know, there is a duality. Like when it comes to, you know, trigger warning, we were talking about, believing victims. And I was like, are there instances in which victims have exacerbated and exaggerated the truth just to be believed? Yes. Are there some instances where victims have outright lied? Absolutely. But is that the majority of the cases? I don't think so. And so, you know, we talked about the disparities of actually who gets jailed. And so if I can pressure someone else into thinking about the duality of believing women when they say that they've been harmed or assaulted, right? Why can't I then apply that same continuity to believing other activists and being like, okay, this is my narrative and this is your narrative. And somehow, even though we traveled along the same trajectory, we got to do different places, but it's still the same narrative. So I think that I will email you and just ask you, you know, if you'd be interested.
And I would love to. And
what? Look at me organizing on the organizer. Okay, all right.
And the other piece of it too, I think, is intimacy. By intimacy, I mean proximity. I think there's something about, I think it's colonization where this is seated, you know, that distances ourselves from those of us who we are closest to as a way to kind of serve out whatever our function is, even if our function is seemingly anti-colonial. You know, I think there's something about the way in which when we are, in terms of our worldview or in terms of our embedded values of the work we are doing is still colonial, right? We cannot get close enough to one another and to ourselves.
Right.
I think what is the truth about, you know, what is vulnerable and what is at stake, you know, and how fucking hard it really is.
It's so bad. And so like there's a heart wound, I think, that many of us don't know we have, because we fill it with anger. Like we're like, there's a hole here and I don't like the hole. And so I'm gonna fill it with anger and rage and like righteous indignation. And you know, and this is why I'm actually glad Sherazar brought up the question, because I was like, if I always ask the questions for me, are people really listening to how it can apply to them? So thank you, Sherazar, for being brave and for being, yeah, thank you. The next thing I wanted to ask you about was, you know, I know that we've talked a little bit about violence, and I know that we've talked about trauma-informed care, but how, if we're not trauma-informed, right, how can we, you know, Audre Lorde says, caring for myself is not an act of self-indulgence, it's a revolutionary political warfare, like, you know, so how can we like engage in steps to like care for ourselves when the world tells us we're not worth caring about?
Yeah. Well, I think the first step, you know, I like to work backwards, is that like I'm worthy of care. You know, that like that's the first step. And I think the second step is then to ask, well, what do I need? I think a lot of times people might ask, I'm worth, or say I'm worthy of care, but then they'll go back out again to the world that doesn't really care about them. Or they'll go out and they're not clear about what it is that they need. So they'll end up getting something that really isn't in a line with what they need. So I think that after you affirm that you are worthy of care, and I think this is particularly important for Black bodies, Black femme bodies, I think you then have to say, well, then what do I need in order to be cared for?
Right.
Because then you know concretely how to go about either getting that or fulfilling that for yourself. Care, I think, like anything, is not something we can do by ourselves. And this is why I think intimacy is really important.
Oh, shit. And I don't think you're talking about romantic intimacy. You're talking about intimacy.
About intimacy.
Oh, you're talking about the whole thing?
I'm talking about intimacy for me generally is about proximity. It's about a close proximity to your heart. Okay. And sometimes that's through romantic intimacy, but sometimes that's through, kinship intimacy, friendship, and kinship is ways, right? Mm-hmm. But when I talk about, intimacy to me is how close am I going to let somebody to my heart so that they can give me what I need?
Ooh. Can I write that down?
Absolutely.
Ooh, child, the ghetto, the ghetto, the ghetto. Intimacy to me is how close
I'm going to let somebody into my heart to give me what I need or to offer me what I need. When I say proximity, I mean literally like it's distal. It's about a closeness.
I feel like you knew what was on my spirit. Because I literally said, my question was, for someone who's polyamorous, I feel like I want more intimacy with some partners than I do with others. Mm-hmm. And I feel selfish for that. I'm like, is this ethical? But there's like this one specific person that I feel like I have this desire to like share myself with, because I trust that person. Absolutely. And so, yeah. But I always feel goofy because like we're not supposed to let down the wall or the guard and be vulnerable. That's what I've been taught. Like, my mom was definitely like a survivor and was like, you can't let nobody get close to you. Like,
I get it, but you don't let, you got that wall up and you're not going to get what you need.
Oh, shit. Yes, ma'am.
I mean, you're just not.
And I'm like, I pride myself on my walls. Okay?
But I'm saying that for me too, because a girl, bitch could like erect a wall in a minute. You know what I mean?
Oh, this is a clear boundary. Okay.
Well, Portland wall ain't got nothing on me and this heart. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Saying this, like, this is not something I don't do. But when I do it, I'm on my scent. I'm like, this is this reflexive response. Right? The way in which I've been told I need to protect and preserve something, right? But if I'm going to if I'm going to actually believe that I can abundantly get what I need to get, and I'm non-monogamous and I believe in relational abundance.
Thank you so much for being this way.
And the thing is that if I believe that, right, that I have to be able to keep my heart open. The only way I can do that is to be honest with myself and the people who I want to be in proximal relationship to. Now, is that shit easy? No. But that's not the goal. The goal is to do the work. The goal really is to be free of all of this.
Ooh, a word. So I just also want to thank you for living your life and in like this freedom that you found for yourself. Because I feel like so many of us don't have great role models. Not saying that you're a role model or anything like that. Bitch, I don't know you. But I'm just saying, like, what I'm saying is it's just really Yes.
I don't
But
control, but I used to model.
yes. Come on, body roll. Yeah. So, I just think of like how like whenever I see polyamorous couples or even, because everything's so men-centered, polygamous couples, like, I just feel like everything's so male-centered, like, and so
Yeah.
seeing a woman say I'm non-monogamous and like this is what my exploration looks like for myself and this is how I get what I need for me without it being assigned or like even parallel to selfishness, like, this is like actually like we all we all need our needs met, so thank you, because that is actually a brave space to operate out of.
And I think that like, I think for me, so I mean, non-monogamy is actually, it's pretty recent for me. I think it is suited for who I am. Because I think that there are many ways in which we can relate. Kim Tallbear talks about, the function of things like the monogamy as well as the nuclear family being an outstart of colonialism. And I do think that that is true. I'm not interested in either heteronormative ways of being in relationship, nor am I interested in ways that are male centered. I'm interested in ways that are about human beings getting all of what their needs are met in ways that are clear and consensual and ethical, right? I can't say, I mean, success for me is just saying that this is the place I'm going to operate from. And I'm not measuring that in terms of how many relationships and the length of time or whatever. I'm measuring in that in terms of this is where I stand and this is always where I'll be centered from. And so
that's so important.
Like that's the conversation I'm having.
Right. Okay.
And I think we have to even get out of these paradigms of success that are still entrenched in a lot of heteronormativity, that are still entrenched in a lot of colonization or nuclearness.
Right. So there's something I was thinking about today, because I was with that person and I was just like, I feel like I've always been trying to, wow, I'm really getting deep and personal with y'all. I feel like I've always been trying to outdo the person that has meant the most to me in my life. Like, not me so much, but like as far as relationships, I was like, if I get into another relationship and I'm like 16 deep at this point, if I get into another relationship, can any of these individuals like top whoever this one person was, and it hasn't been the case. And I think it's because there's like some sort of click in my brain that's like, there's this one person that's like all the things that you needed or whatever, and that person wasn't even all the things that they needed for themselves. So that couldn't have been true, right? Is what the story I have to recondition myself with. And so like I just appreciate this whole reframing, because when I was with someone I'm very vulnerable with today, I was like, will this even work? Like, what does this look like? Because none of this is normal. And I had to stop myself. Like literally, I yelled at myself inside my head. I'm like, it doesn't matter. You got to stop comparing apples to oranges. Like, I'm saying? Like,
well, yeah. And in some ways you have to trust yourself that you know what you need and that you recognize that you're getting what you need. And there's something about, and I think this is also a function of capitalism, where everything becomes commodified, and commodification is about an externalization. And that I only know what I need when it's externalized, not when I can sense something in myself.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that person can sense something in themselves, and we can communicate from that place and say it's good.
Ooh. Thank you for talking about love, because it's been a concurrent theme, but like everyone is in their space, something I wanted to ask you is what are like, I don't know, I don't have to count. I was going to say 5, but you can just even give one. What's one tangible step that someone, I don't know, who is struggling with, like, I'm a very beautiful person inside and out, right? I know this. And I had to quote Megan Thee Stallion today, and I was like, hey, I'm too sexy to have sex under the covers. So can we like actually like, and it's because I have to deprogram myself that even though I'm not the weight that I used to be, or, you know, the body type that I used to be, that I have to say to myself, this is the skin and the body that we are in now, and we deserve, and this stage and this space and this mindset and this with these titties to to explore pleasure and like have it for ourselves and not for the other person. And so like, is there something that someone who's like, I'm struggling with self-image or I'm struggling with self-worth can like begin to do so that way that they can affirm themselves, you know?
I've been really working, like I told you, I cut all my hair off. And,
Yes, it was such a beautiful photo.
yeah, I'll be releasing it soon.
I'll be releasing it.
I will. Well, because it's like I get so much feedback on my looks, and and honestly, it's not something that means to the world what it means to me. I mean, it's like if I feel good, that's when I feel I look good. You know?
I understand that. That resonates.
And so what I've been working on, especially with this transition with my hair, and even with my body, because it's, I'm aging, and, my body is changing, and I'm caring less about food and eating, and, as long as clothes fit, even if they're tight, I don't care.
Right.
But one of the things that's been helping me is to be really gentle with myself. Whether it's my talk with myself, whether it's my affirmations, like whatever it is, like I'm just like, baby, it's all right. Like that's just kind of whatever you're doing. I think to do it with a sense of gentleness, like care for yourself. I think there's a way in which, and I know this, I see this with other people, but I see this with myself, that like the tone that I take with myself is the tone I take into the world.
Ooh. You out here dropping bangers. It's a mixtape and an album. Okay. The tone I take with myself is the tone I take with the world. Woo.
So I've been really trying to be really gentle with myself. I mean, I've been, going through a big transition for myself, not just with hair, but just in my life. And, sometimes I wake up and I could just feel the anxiety, the dread. And I'm like, baby girl, that's all right. You can just lay here for a little bit. You can get out this bed just a little slow.
Right.
I mean, there's a way in which the care that I give for myself is also a way in which I'm modeling the care in which I want and need from
you. I want to know, I feel like that's a full circle statement because that brings it back. You're like, of course it is. I'm fucking Sadada Jackson. Like that's the look you just gave, and I accept that. I feel like you brought it back to full circle when you were saying that, like, I want someone who's hurting me to hurt less because I know that that's what they're coming from. So if someone's tone that they take with themselves is angry at themselves, that's how they're showing up in the world. Or if I could go backwards, like you said, if someone is showing up angry in every space that they go, or like with an unseemingly disparate rage or whatever, it's probably the tone that they're taking with themselves. If I have to look at bitches in duality, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is who you talk to in the mirror, and that is why it's coming out in these ways. I'd even have to say about myself, the way that I'm dismissive at times with people, like I'm like constantly like delegating and be like, this needs to get done. I don't know what to tell you. I am like my hardest critic. And I'd be in the mirror like Issa on Insecure. I'd be like, bitch, this needs to get done. I don't know what to tell you. Like, and so like mitigating those two things is actually really helpful for me.
Mm-hmm. And then when people come at you, there's a way in which you...
Oh, they're never allowed.
No, but I'm saying if and when people come at you with their stuff, like their critics or whatever, you just cut through that shit. And it's like, oh no, sweetie, this is not Like, I'm not you. You might treat you like that, but you're not going to treat me like that.
Ooh, gang, I shot you down. That is actually really important. Tanya Nixon said, oh, sorry, Tanya Nixon Silberg says, we talk, Tanya, she said, we talk a lot about extending grace to the other person and honoring their traumas. But when can we do that for ourselves? And can that be done at the same time?
Yeah, I think it could only, Tanya, I think it could only be done at the same time when we are resourced in our practice of doing it for ourselves. I think when we do it to other people and we are not doing it for ourselves in the moment that we're experiencing trauma or pain, it is a violence against ourselves, and we have to go. We have to go. This is not the time. It's not the time. I mean, I've been in situations, both personal situations, but also public situations, where it's like, it's not the time for me to be extending myself to you in your traumatic place, because this shit is kicking up my stuff. And so then I got to retreat. I got to protect my energy. Ooh. What that looks like is, there's a song.
I love songs. I love this song. I feel it already.
Feel it?
I feel it.
So this is my guide to extending grace to when people are experiencing trauma or when we are doing our own. When we are in that place, we have to know 4 things. We have to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. Kenny Rogers, honey. This is the discernment you have to do before you extend any grace to anybody.
That's a mouthful. Thank you. I'm gonna reflect upon that. The last question I have for you is my own personal question, because I knew that you was a dancer or whatever, and you Afro-Cuban, you out here, when you talked earlier, you spoke of, and I feel like Luana very sneaky and very smart at the same time. She be knowing what she's doing. When you said I practice Santeria and Ifa, I was like, or you're very connected to those 2 things. I was like, there's a Singing in Cinderella, the Disney movie. She was like, so sing, sweet nightingale. That's what I just started fucking, like, that's what I started doing just now when you said this shit, because I was like, this is my trajectory. So I am initiated, and I feel like constantly looking for community, because I'm back and forth between 2 cities so much, that like you were here this whole time, but I wasn't supposed to know until I went through my own process. So thanks, Lou, again.
Well, first thing, I want to say Alafia.
Alafia, yes.
And I am not initiated. I am a devotee of Ocho. And I've spent probably about 10 years in the community. I've traveled to Cuba, dance, Afro-Cuban dance, taught it, and so on. And the culture is very, very important to me.
What is the importance of spirituality in our healing, especially when we're talking about non-colonized spirituality?
Well, I mean, I think it's central both in our healing and in our social justice movement. Because it's center. It's the ground by which, in some ways, like the earth, it's the soil, it's the nutrients. But it's also the thing that grounds us, that centers us, that nourishes us, that grows us. That helps us know when it's time to rest, when it's time to toil, when it's time to grow. In many ways, it's kind of our teacher of what we need to do and when. I mean, anybody that I know, both personally and studied otherwise, has a deep spiritual practice, whatever it is, and right. They're not particularly colonized about it, because they understand that spirituality is about an action that they need to do in the world to enact a liberation for all beings, not just themselves. They're not trying to escape. They're not using their spirituality as a bypass, as an escape, as an exercise, right. Whatever, excuse or whatever. It's a relationship. You know, it helps you understand that this is not about you and you have to do it.
Right.
And for me, you know, I think the work of decolonizing or uncolonizing, however you want to put it, is really important, but I'm really interested in indigenizing. You know, there's not a piece of land that is not indigenous land in this world. I am deeply interested in the way in which we as human beings, whatever our skin complexion is, we will return to our indigenous ways.
Thank you so much for that. My last question is a question that I ask every single guest. I feel it's a two-pronged question because I am a two-pronged complicated bitch. And
complicated bitch.
Yes. And y'all just gonna have to love me for where I'm at.
I love it.
The first part of the question is there anything that we did not cover or go over that you were like, that you were surprised about that I didn't ask you, or that you were like, hold up, I got to talk about this thing that's coming up. I got to let people know. And then the second part is, who would you like to see on the show if you watch my show?
I'm always bad at these questions. I ask these questions. I think these are good questions.
Thank you for, first of all, thank you for saying it's a good question, because I know it's a good question.
I know it's a good question.
Y'all watch the show and niggas still don't know that I asked this question.
So let me think about, yeah, it's hard. I would have to think about who. So I'm gonna put that in my corner of my mind. But let me think about what we haven't spoken about. Care. I think more directly care. The importance of care, not as a supplication of guilt or obligation, but care as the place in which we both give and act from. That we're acting from a place of care, first for ourselves, and then for another. You know, I think there's just not enough care right now. You know, I think people, you know, we've been in this quarantine, or, you know, in these epidemics of racism and colonization and capitalism and COVID-19, you know, and one of the things I get concerned about is the lack of care. And by care, I think I mean the genuine concern for another human body, ourselves, in relation to rebirth. And somebody I think I sometimes will present a bias, and not always, but sometimes I do. Is also, she's a Nipmuc, she's Black woman too, is Nia Holly.
Is Nia who?
Holly.
Okay, all right. I will write their name down. If you could do an email introduction, that would be amazing.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I just want to say, I was going to say a whole bunch, but like something that's screaming at me, and I'm trying to listen to that voice because I know it's not me. I know it's my ancestors. Something that I picked up, you know, without trying to culturally appropriate yoga, is the light in me sees the light in you. That shit makes me cry every single time I go to a yoga class. So I stopped going to yoga because, because I kept seeing all these white people. I was like, bitch, I don't see your light. Like, you know what I'm saying? I just see mine. So I stopped going to yoga. But I really enjoy the practice of yoga. I enjoy paying someone $40 for the hour and a half. It's gonna take me 15 minutes to get there, 15 minutes back. I miss being in practice, in my own personal practice. I know I could do it at home, but the yoga studio that I have found was at Rooted in Albany, Black owned company, Black owned instructor, Black instructors, and like just really fat friendly, like, you know what I'm saying? So it's just, I just wanted to say that being around folks who are yogis that are Black is amazing, and just such a healing like modality for me, that I'm just so glad that we had this conversation. And I do want to let you know that the light in me definitely sees the light in you, and I appreciate you sharing your light this evening with us, with all of us, because this will definitely be a conversation I go back and replay. So thank you.
Thank you, Didi. Thank you, everybody who's been bearing witness and here for this. And you know, mostly I'm deeply, deeply, deeply grateful for the work that you do, for the space that you've created tonight. And just, you know, I love you.
I love you too. Oh my God.
Thank you.
I'm smiling so big right now. My ears are burning. And it's not, you know, thank you to Jamaica for blowing dry my hair. She did burn me on my ear, but it's not that. I'm genuinely happy right now. And I wasn't necessarily in that place. So thank you. Thank you for allowing me to reframe my own thoughts about myself and where I'm sitting right now. So that way I can do a shift. So thank you. You did so much labor. You don't even realize.
I appreciate it.
I hope that y'all have a great evening. This has been another amazing episode of The Full Set. I hope that you have an amazing night, and I will be following up with you via email.
Absolutely same.
All right. Peace, y'all.